Hello gamers. So today is a big day. A ton of stuff has come out about new buffs for some of the older characters, and some of these are really big. So I have created my usual PowerPoint presentation format here. I tried to summarize stuff to make it easier to understand because there's a lot of stuff. I also want to say take some of the numbers, like damage numbers, with a grain of salt because these might change. I also want to say there are some changes that are locked. Most changes are locked behind the new stellar conduct reaction, but some of them aren't. Some of them are just straight up personal damage buffs to the characters, which is very welcome. Anyways, let's not waste any more time because I have a lot of stuff to cover. First character we're going to talk about is Yae Miko, and so these are all new changes. So when your 3 turrets are active, casting your skill creates an additional lightning strike. This sounds like you won't get that much use out of it until you look at this third buff here. So while in the Radiance effect, this is the new Stellar Conduct equivalent of like the Hexarai, essentially. When you trigger Stellar Conduct, or when you trigger Superconduct, it creates a stellar domain, and when you're in this domain, you gain like this Radiance effect. And so while Yae Miko has this Radiance effect, her turret damage is converted into Stellar Superconduct damage. Her turret duration is also increased by 10 seconds, so her turrets now last 24 seconds. You also get an enhanced Stellar Lightning Strike every 2.5 seconds, and while you're in the Radiance effect, turrets do more stellar damage. I left numbers out, but just know it's a lot of extra damage. It's a lot of just personal damage. And her burst no longer consumes her turrets or destroys them, and actually might summon them instead. The wording and translation might be a little bit off. Can't really know for sure, but the wording was kind of insinuating that when you use her burst, it actually summons a whole new set of 3 turrets. Again, could be translation, not 100% sure. But either way, her burst no longer destroys turrets, which is a very nice quality of life. Also a bunch of great changes to her constellation. So her C1, and these are all additional effects on top of her already existing constellations. But after triggering Stellar Conduct, 40% electro damage bonus to all party members. So a nice little supportive effect there. Her C2 gives 200 EM to herself and also the active character. And this is without the Stellar Radiance. So this is just straight up, this is a buff to all of her teams, right? Her C4 allows her to restore more energy, and her burst damage is increased by 100%. And her C6 turrets ignore 60% of enemies' defense. Stellar crit damage increased by 150%. So massive buffs here for Yae Miko all across the board, not just in stellar teams, but also just her normal teams. Moving on to Cyno. While in the Radiance effect, the Stellar Radiance effect, the Adjudication effect, which is Cyno's passive, where he gets like extra lightning bolts. All of this damage is converted into stellar damage. This stellar damage is increased by 600% of Cyno's EM. Using your skill now activates your burst state for 6 seconds, and I put in parentheses overworld buff because I'm not a Cyno main, I don't play Cyno. Let me know if you're a Cyno main, if this actually has some real combat implications, but I'm pretty sure this is mostly just an overworld buff because a lot of Cyno's damage is tied to his burst. And so I think now this allows him to alleviate that issue of, needing a bunch of energy to do some damage in the overworld. And now when you use your skill, you get your burst state for 6 seconds, which is pretty nice. But I don't think it has any real combat implications in terms of increasing the damage of his best teams and stuff, but let me know if I'm wrong about that. So here we got some Cyno constellations. He gets a new effect called the Rising Sun Together effect, and this is behind the Stellar Radiance effect. So this effect gives 200 EM to Cyno, and it also gives 200 EM to the next character you swap to for the remaining buff duration. I don't know how long this buff lasts, but it's pretty cool. It gives 200 EM to Cyno, and whatever is left of the duration gets used onto the next character, so it's not wasted. So for C2, the previously mentioned Rising Sun Together effect now stacks with normal attacks. You get 10% for every normal attack, up to 50% stellar damage bonus. And this is additional to his already existing C2. The C4 is just energy basically for triggering stellar conduct, nothing else. His C6 is basically the same. It functions the same way, except the damage is all converted to stellar if you're in your radiance effect. So big buffs for Cyno. Moving on to Wriothesley. The 3rd and 5th attack in your normal attack string now does 40 and 60% bonus stellar damage respectively while you're in the radiance effect. The charge attack does 100% bonus stellar damage, and your overall stellar damage reaction damage is increased by 30%. And for his constellations, you get 50% damage to your 5th attack and your charge attack. And this is behind the stellar radiance effect. Also, while under the radiance effect on C2, your 3rd and 5th attack stellar damage is increased by 60 and 90% respectively. The charge attack is increased by 150%. This part is if you're not in your radiance effect. So this is just a buff to his C2 even outside of the radiance. And this is your normal attacks and charge attacks are increased by 125 and 130% of their original values. Now his C4 is actually a replacement, I believe, to his original C4. So if you're in the radiance effect, you gain 25% damage reduction, 20% attack speed, and 10% attack speed to all party members. Yeah, so while you're in your radiance effect, this actually replaces the original C4. And similar to the C4, the C6, this replaces the original effect of the C6. Your charge attack gains 10% crit rate and 80% crit damage. Your 5th attack and charge attack creates an icicle that deals 40% of original damage, considered stellar damage. So very similar to his original C6, it's just converted to a stellar version essentially. Now we have buffs for Mizuki, and I'm gonna be honest, Mizuki is one of the characters I know the least about. I just don't hear much about her. I don't exactly know how she works, but obviously I want to cover this anyways. For any Mizuki mains, maybe you can tell me if this is really big buffs, really big changes, or maybe they're not. But while she's in her Dream Drifter state, which I think is when she's like floating around in her skill, triggering Swirl increases her next AoE damage hit by 1000% of her EM. And she also shares 10% of her EM to all party members, so that's really nice. We love EM share effects, and EM share effects are really good these days with lunar teams, so I'm guessing they're also good in stellar conduct teams. So we have some changes to her constellations as well. Her C1 gains an additional Animo attack equal to 1000% of her EM. Her C2 gains 20% Pyro Hydro Cryo Electro Res Shred. C4 just gives more healing. And C6, she gains crit rate and crit damage for every 100 EM she gains after 500, up to a maximum of 20% crit rate and 80% crit damage. So Mizuki mains, let me know if this is huge buffs or not. I mean, it sounds pretty big to me, but you know, I have no idea. Qiqi, honestly, Qiqi, one of the characters that was just absolutely left in the dust, getting some massive changes here. So while you're in the Radiance effect, the talisman now has a 100% chance to trigger and can trigger every 15 seconds instead of a 50% chance every 30 seconds. Her skill cooldown is reduced by 15 seconds. As far as I am aware, this has nothing to do with Stellar Radiance or anything like that. It's just straight up her skill cooldown is now 15 seconds instead of 30 seconds. So pretty massive change there. However, this is during the Radiance effect. While your skill is active, 50% Superconduct, Stellar, and Cryo Swirl damage. Her skill now does coordinated Cryo attacks, and while in Radiance effect, her burst does Stellar damage. There are some changes to her constellations as well. Her coordinated attacks restore energy. It triggers once every 6 seconds. Her C2 is while in the Radiance effect, Qiqi's attack is increased by 50%, so that's just for her personal damage. Her C4, an additional effect, her talisman now heals the lowest HP party member. And her C6, when you activate her burst, you get 4 stellar quills that are all increased by 600% of Qiqi's attack. So she gains a little quill system for stellar conduct damage. Pretty cool. Big changes for Qiqi. In quality of life, her kit was super outdated. Very welcome changes. And now we have changes to the 4 stars. These changes are a lot smaller, and there's not as many of them, but obviously still welcome. A lot of people already have all these characters. So when you hold your skill now, you gain a stack every 0.8 seconds, and you don't have to get hit for it to activate. and it increases damage when you release. Each stack that you gain reduces your skill cooldown by 4 seconds and restores energy. This can trigger once every 15 seconds. So this is only during the Radiance effect, but during her burst, she shreds nearby enemies for 15% Cryo Res Shred and 200 EM to the active characters, so that's really nice. And this is the last character who got buffs, Diona. We already knew Diona was getting changes, so no surprise here. But for 20 seconds after using her skill, Super Conduct, Stellar Conduct, and Cryo Swirl will trigger Icy Paw coordinated attacks. These can trigger once every 3.5 seconds. These won't generate energy or create shields. And I'm pretty sure this is without the Radiance effect. This is just a brand new Diona passive. For C6, she gets a max HP increased by 50%. And this following portion is only for the Radiance Stellar Conduct, but characters inside the burst field gain 40% Super Conduct, Stellar Conduct, and Cryo Swirl damage. And those are all the changes. I might have missed like a few things here and there. I left out some numbers because, again, sometimes they change, and pretty big stuff. It addresses, at least somewhat addresses, one of the biggest concerns I had for Stellar Conduct, and I still do have this concern because this Stellar Conduct reaction is going to be locked behind 5-star characters, most likely. I wanted this reaction really to make some of the older characters relevant again. I said it in one of my previous videos where I was hoping it would be a very supportive reaction and it would bring, you know, characters like Yae Miko, maybe characters like Raiden back into the forefront, make them strong again. I don't think Raiden was changed, but Yae Miko was definitely changed. I think these are all very welcome buffs. Some of them are incredibly strong. I think Yae Miko is one of the biggest winners. She seems to be incredibly strong, just from looking at the numbers and just guessing off of the vibes. Yae Miko seems to be one of the biggest winners, but definitely insane damage buffs all across the board. A lot of supportive buffs as well, quality of life for characters like Qiqi. Honestly, all very welcome changes and kind of exactly what I was hoping for with this new reaction. Unfortunately, the reaction, you know, is still probably going to be locked behind 5-star characters, which is unfortunate, but at least we are seeing buffs to older characters. Yeah, let me know what you guys think. Let me know if there's any potential synergies or things that you can think of right off the bat. I haven't had much time to think about it because I started making this presentation like as soon as these leaks started coming out, so I haven't had much time to speculate about it. Yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys around. Bye bye.